Hey everybody, it's PartyElite with another online battle today. This time I take the Dark Elves to the field against the Wood Elves of Lerooooooy. If there are any factions that you'd like to see in action, let me know in the comments down below and I'll try and make it happen. We begin, as always, with talk of composition and deployment, and while my Dark Elves are relatively aggressive, the Wood Elves keep things somewhat simple. Let's start with my Dark Elves. As you can see, Malekith is in charge atop a cold one, and the front line consists of 4 units of Bleak Swords. These guys with their silver shields will stay relatively safe from Wood Elf range. Right behind them on either flank we have the Witch Elves, eager to inflict the Madness of Cain on enemy units, while back here we also have the Dread Spears down the middle, protecting the Reaper Bolt Thrower that'll do a lot of damage to enemy range support when front lines eventually meet, and it's not able to cause damage to some of these other frontline units over here. Then all the way at the back on either flank we have a unit of Cold One Knights, able to push in against enemy large units, and we also have up front Vanguard deployed a pair of Dark Riders with shields on either flank, and down the middle 2 units of Dark Riders with repeater crossbows. The hope here was that I would get a little bit of damage done and then peel away, hurt some units, peel away, and continue to do that, of course. Just kite away. Of course, the range isn't the best on these Dark Riders with repeater crossbows, but they were also my backup plan in case there was anything in the air for the Wood Elves. On either flank, these Dark Riders with shields are hoping to pin down some Wild Riders so these Cold One Knights can push in after them, and then afterwards we can also go in chasing after enemy range support. On the other side of the field, let's take a look at the Wood Elves. As you can see, a Glade Lord is in charge on foot, and she's assisted by a Spellsinger of Shadows as well as a Spellsinger of Life. Down the middle, we have these 3 units of Dryads, and on either flank, we have this other unit of Dryads and the War Dancers, and on the right flank, 2 units of War Dancers. These Wild Riders will be pushing out, looking to do some serious harm to some of my cavalry, or of course push in for rear charges, side charges, and of course charging into any range support I might bring. Now, Wild Riders are very scary. They have a high melee attack. They also have physical resistance, so they are a pretty threatening unit. At the back, meanwhile, we have 3 units of Glade Guard, 1 with Hagbane tips, able to inflict poison damage, and then we've got these Eternal Guards on either flank, ranked up to Gold 1, so they're a pretty threatening unit as well, protecting these archers from any large units that I bring in from the sides and rear. So with all that said and done, let's take a look at how this all breaks down. Right away, of course, the Glade Guard from the Wood Elves open fire, and I immediately respond by pulling back, trying to get these Dark Riders into safety. You'll see we take a touch of damage here on this one unit, but overall we're not doing too poorly. And while I send these Dark Riders with shields out at first to just poke and prod, you'll see as these Wild Riders push off to the sides, I immediately retreat. I do not stand a chance there. Even with 2 units of Dark Riders with shields, that's a risky proposition. And as the Wood Elf army creeps forward, you'll see these Dark Riders just pull back into safety, and again, just looking for an opportunity to open fire at some of these Dryads. And meanwhile, the Reaper Bolt Thrower, having opened some shots into these Dryads early on, now turns around to open shots into these Wild Riders, trying to kill a couple of these Wild Riders before they're able to get any work done. And now my Dark Riders with repeater crossbows get a nice volley into these Dryads, do a fair bit of damage, but unfortunately they don't retreat in time, and one of them takes a tremendous amount of damage. They're dropping to about quarter health. Meanwhile, I've got my Cold One Knights joining these Dark Riders with shields on either flank, hoping to take care of those Wild Riders nice and early. And over here on the right here, we have the first piece of aggression, pushing out of the trees, diving right into these Wild Riders, and take a look at that. They're outnumbered significantly, and I also bring in these Cold One Knights from the rear, just push them in and coming from a rear charge there to try and shut that Wild Rider unit down as early as possible, while on the left flank, I send these Cold One Knights out on their own, chasing after the Wild Riders, and that is definitely not a good call, as those Wild Riders will make very quick work of those Cold One Knights. Up front here, you'll see though the Bleak Swords were under fire from those Glade Guard with Hagbane tips and without, but their silver shields will keep them relatively safe, so they decide to turn around and chase after some of my Dark Riders, as they do have their backs turned to all of those arrows. Over here, the Dark Riders with repeater crossbows firing away at some of these War Dancers, as they are a very threatening unit, and of course I want to take care of that nice and early, while the Reaper Bolt Thrower now once more focusing in on some of these infantry units as these cavalry units have pushed off to the sides. Take a look on the left here, though. The Cold One Knights very quickly falling apart. We've got the Eternal Guard pushing in as well, so I try to intercept them with my Dark Riders with shields, while this other unit of Dark Riders with shields pushes in, chases after some of these Glade Guard who are firing away at my various units of Dark Riders with shields on the right flank over here. Chill Wind goes down in the middle over here, trying to slow these guys down as I charge in, and we also get a little bit of a Blade Wind going on over here. Not the best Blade Wind, I have to say, but it does a fair bit of damage to these Dryads. And all the way off to the left over here, you'll see my Cold One Knights have been inflicted with Rampage. Unfortunately, they're not the most orderly troops, let's say, so they're now stuck in this engagement, and I'm not even able to pull them away, and they're surrounded by Wild Riders as well as the Eternal Guard. I try to save my Dark Riders with shields over here, but unfortunately it looks like those Cold One Knights have been lost to rampaging. Over here though, I get a nice rear charge into the Glade Guard over here, trying to shut down all of that range support, and I send in these guys as well, using the trees for cover while I wait for these guys to arrive and close the gap there, and then going in for that charge, but unfortunately just not fast enough. The Glade Lord, you'll see here, creeping over towards these guys. One of them starts to rout, and the other gets hit by the Prey of Anathema. So not a good situation for myself here, as the other unit is routing and pushing away, and some of these guys are still able to open fire. I get these Dark Riders over here pushing in for a rear charge, trying to shut down that left flank as quickly as possible, and I also have those Dark Riders with the repeater crossbows providing some assistance, while the Reaper Bolt Thrower as well firing into the Dryads and doing a little bit of friendly fire. Over here I decide to pull away from these archers over here as the Wild Riders are pushing in towards me, and I want to hold them in place. I don't want them to get the soul charge, and in comes Murderous Prowess. And at this point in time, I'm hoping to get as much melee damage done as possible. You'll see I even have these Dark Riders pushing in for rear charges, and the Penumbral Pendulum pushes in and absolutely devastates my lines over here, obliterating this unit of Bleak Swords, doing a fair bit of damage to the Witch Elves as well, and these Dread Spears as well take a fair bit of hurt. I respond with a Blade Wind in kind on the left over here, and though it's off to the side, it does enough damage to the War Dancers to get rid of them, to get them to rout off the field, but unfortunately it pulls away to the other side and does next to nothing, but at least it frees up that left flank of mine. You'll see over here the Reaper Bolt Thrower continues to provide some support, firing into the Eternal Guard over here, and these archers, these Glade Guard, are firing away, doing a fair bit of damage to my Dark Riders with shields into their sides though, so the shields are basically worthless. I'm trying to get, again, as many melee engagements right now as possible, but unfortunately, as you'll see, the Wood Elves are largely surrendering, retreating, giving up, and I'm not keeping them engaged in melee, so the Murderous Prowess is being largely wasted. In the center over here, meanwhile, Malekith does dive into the Glade Lord, hits her with Word of Pain as well, reducing her melee attack capabilities and just trying to get rid of that enemy leadership. Over here, meanwhile, we have Gaze of Malice hitting these Glade Guard, again reducing their health significantly, while the Reaper Bolt Thrower continues to fire away at them as well, again trying to get rid of enemy range support, hold it in place, pin it down, scare it off, whatever it might be. I need to remove them from the field, or at least reduce their capabilities on the field. At the back here, you'll see I do have these Witch Elves sort of hanging back, trying to keep these Reaper Bolt Thrower units safe, while up front another Chill Wind goes down, just trying to hurt these guys and again scare them off the field. Does enough to the Glade Guard over here to reduce their morale significantly, as these Bleak Swords over here are closing the gap as well, and of course the artillery fire is not helping their morale either. In comes another volley there, doing a fair bit of damage, and these guys do decide to rout. Earthblood goes down in the center over here, helping the Spellsinger of Life as well as the Glade Lord, of course, but Malekith is having an absolute field day over there, while these Dark Riders with their shields push in, and unfortunately all the way off in the distance over here, my Cold One Knights are doing nothing. They're just sitting there looking pretty. They need to be brought in, and I feel a little wasteful over there. Wonderful resource being sent off to the side there, chasing after the Wild Riders early on, but unfortunately not used ever since the beginning of this battle. In the center, though, you can see here Malekith is having a great time against the Glade Lord. Even with Word of Pain gone, he's got really nothing to worry about, while over here we have these Eternal Guard getting sandwiched by the Cold One Knights as well as the Dark Riders with shields. Unfortunately, the sandwich was not enough to scare these guys off the field, and even with the Dark Rider with repeater crossbows opening fire, these Eternal Guard are willing to stick around and really reduce the fighting capability of these Cold One Knights, completely remove them from the field. Over here, we've got these Witch Elves as well that were earlier posted by the Reaper Bolt Thrower, pushing forward and chasing after the Glade Lord, inflicting her with the Madness of Cain. She is rampaging, as you can see, and now she's stuck in melee with Malekith, which is absolutely wonderful for me. Meanwhile, the Reaper Bolt Thrower itself continues to fire away at the various Glade Guard units, again, trying to remove any and all range support. The Bleak Swords giving chase. We get a nice rear charge from the Wild Riders here, trying to scare these guys off, but unfortunately that's not enough. They continue onwards, they turn around and get back into the fray over here, but again, just not enough, as these Dark Riders with repeater crossbows as well, firing away, trying to get rid of those Glade Guards. You'll see these Dryads as well pushing in now, but the Witch Elves over here have the Spellsinger of Life as well as the Eternal Guard caught in this melee situation. The Dryads are diving in as well. The Witch Elves are going to inflict them with the Madness of Cain as well, while Malekith over here continues to give chase to the Glade Lord, just trying to finish her off, try to get rid of enemy leadership, reduce enemy leadership. Prey of Anathema goes down, though, very nicely done there, holding Malekith in place. He's surrounded by Dryads, and the Glade Lord again, one last hurrah, trying to just stick around here, pops the Arrow of Kronos, does a fair bit of damage to my Dark Riders over here, but Chillwind comes in, again doing a little bit of hurt to these Dryads, enough to reduce their morale, to scare them off the field, and ultimately the Wood Elves decide today is not the day to stick around and fight. Finally, these Cold One Knights show up, but it's already a Pyrrhic victory for my Dark Elves. I had a feeling the Wood Elves might not go airborne with this battle, so I kept my range contingent relatively small. I wanted a very large cavalry contingent in case there were a ton of Wood Elf archers to deal with. Unfortunately, there weren't all that many, and the Wild Riders, alongside my easily enraged Cold One Knights, made sure I lost some of the cavalry very early on. The Dark Riders, even with their shields, fell rather easily, but my Reaper Bolt Thrower was a key unit that my opponent should have devoted more resources to. A fun battle overall, and I'm just glad there were no Forest Dragons on the other side of the field. As always, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more Total War content. Online battles and Total Breakdown will continue to bring you a constant flow of tactical analysis. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to meeting you on the battlefield.